So I'm gonna just get us started real quick. So my name is Jonathan Jardis. I'm an intern here at Sports Philanthropy Network. Thank you guys all for joining us today for the sponsorship panel. And I'm gonna turn it over to Lisa, who will be moderating us.
Hi, I'm Lisa Delphi-Narati. I'm a professor of sports management and sport philanthropy at the George Washington University. I direct the GW Sport Philanthropy Executive Certificate, as well as the undergrad and graduate sports management programs. But I'm here today to talk about sponsorship with our three panelists, including Jennifer Kay with CO Events, Gretchen Ham with Washington Spirit, and Melissa Legowski with Big Buzz Idea Group. I'm going to begin by asking each one of our panelists to introduce themselves briefly and share with us their experience in sponsorship. So Gretchen, would you like to start?
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, guys. Happy to be here. Although I'm with a professional sports team now, I actually have probably 15 years of nonprofit executive management and fundraising. So certainly excited to talk about this topic today with you all.
And she has that across both, lots of different nonprofits and then also the sports team, so you can get a flavor. Okay, Melissa?
Thank you, Lisa. Super excited to be with everybody. I am the founder, owner of Big Buzz Idea Group, and Big Buzz Idea Group exists to help nonprofits fill gaps that they might have on their teams, knowing that everybody's trying to do so much with so little. We focus on management, marketing, and events, and we got our start in events because in 1999, I had my first role as an executive director where I was charged with 24 events each year, 12 newsletters, 225 members, and that one of those large events was a street festival we ran in-house, and I was a staff of one. So I loved what I was doing, but I got burnout and decided that I really wanted to create Big Buzz as just a resource for organizations. And since starting in 1999, I've been able to work with brands like Alpo and Guinness, Bud Light, Xfinity, Vienna Beef, and many, many more. And so very happy to try to help organizations be able to level up their sponsorship game today.
Excellent. And relationships are so important. So when you mentioned having a connection with somebody in one of those companies, you're not exactly cold calling. You're somewhat, either hot or warm calling at least. And I know Gretchen has a lot of experience, has a big Rolodex or big iPhone decks right now. Jennifer.
Great. Hi, nice to meet everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a little bit of a mutt in the nonprofit world. I've been in the nonprofit space 25 years. I have a degree in event management. I actually was a D1 athlete. I played volleyball for Florida State and then actually proceeded to play for overseas a little bit, but really came out, and I've been in the nonprofit space in a variety of capacities throughout my career. I've planned every event under the sun, you can imagine. Creo Events is just a name. Really, I'm a consultant. I get brought on by either nonprofits or other event management firms or other fundraising firms to help with strategy, direct fundraising, growth capacity, board development, talent advisory. So a little bit of everything. My clients right now are heavy in the military space, National Defense University Foundation. I just wrote a brand new campaign for the Gary Sinise Foundation. So I will take clients from where they need to be, or I can do soup to nuts. I am a very, very big believer that cold call sponsorship does not work. There's got to be strategy around it. I am a connector. I kind of never lose anybody. So once they're in, they're in. But I'm a connector. I connect the dots, and I raise millions of dollars and provide strategy to nonprofits.
Yes, we love connectors. I think everybody here on this panel are connectors. So, and I like to start off, let's reverse it. Usually you talk about trends at the end, but let's start at trends in the sponsorship space. What are some trends? I'll start in the middle here with Melissa.
So I think the last year has really changed things a lot. I thought I had seen everything, thought I had kind of known how to anticipate growth and what to do. And so I think when we talk about trends, I'm continuing to find that even though we've been in this, shut down and we're opening back up in many places, that most of the sponsors we're talking to still want to be in front of people. And as long as you can give them those opportunities in some capacity, there are still dollars to be found. I know a lot of people had, really their sponsorship programs dried up last year. We have a couple of projects. Again, we were talking a little bit kind of before we got on live today about the social justice space. And I continue to find that my clients that are working in that space have actually seen growth in their sponsorship. So I think really kind of knowing your assets and knowing what you've got to work with is incredibly important. And I continue to find across the board that brand alignment is probably the biggest ongoing trend where I'm seeing the most growth. In the early days of my sponsorship career, I mean, if somebody wanted to give you money, you took it, and kind of try to figure out the details later. But we actually have some clients who have turned away very sizable sponsors because they don't align with their organizational values. And I think knowing who they are and being able to have that alignment is just a really wonderful thing. And I strongly encourage it between organizations and sponsors.
Excellent. Yes, brand alignment is huge right now. How about Jennifer?
Sure. I would actually start off by saying I wasn't sure where this was going, but you highlighted, Melissa, several points. One, brand alignment, and I'll actually concur with what you're talking about. One of my clients, Habitat for Humanity, raising lots of money, or a vape company wanted to give them money, and they toyed with it. And I'm just, you can't. I mean, you're here for families and children and building homes and healthy lifestyles. You cannot, it's kind of like the Philip Morris story, right? The other thing too, just a trend, I think by flipping the case for support, one of the things I had been telling my clients is that despite the fact that we've got this global pandemic and we're moving towards, social justice and DEI education, that doesn't negate the fact that there are other nonprofits that focus on other missions, and those aren't going away just because our attention is being focused on Black Lives Matters or DEI and LGBTQ. Those are all great, don't get me wrong, but we still need to feed the hungry. We still need to build homes we still need to support Border Patrol. I'm working on a project for the Border Patrol Foundation right now. We still need to support those families of fallen Border Patrol officers. That's number one. Number two, I'm taking a little bit of a different approach with a couple of my clients. Instead of asking for funding through a foundation or through the nonprofit arm, really shifting towards taking it from an advertising marketing division or department. For example, Swim Across America has given hundreds of thousands of dollars to cancer research, to their benefactors. They've partnered with Discovery Communication. We took a series of documentaries, 6-part, that they have been produced with Discovery, and we're selling 6 $50,000 advertising marketing opportunities to whoever those, and we've sold 5 of them. So I think that's a little bit of a different approach. It's not necessarily coming from the nonprofit space. It's coming from the fundraising space. It's coming from an ROI. At 50,000, you're going to get so many eyes watching this documentary.
Can you just, I want to make sure we all understand. So Discovery gave you the rights to sell advertisement in their documentary. Correct. And their documentary is being distributed on their Discovery channel or
channel. They'll I don't have all those details, but that's the strategy, is that it'll be on YouTube, on their channel. It'll be a 6-part series. I think the launch is coming up. And so, Swim Across America had the opportunity to sell 6 packages at $50,000 each. So that's a great way to work with nonprofits. If there's an opportunity, I just actually gave the same strategy to a small independent nonprofit here in the Washington, D.C. area called Docs in Progress. They do a film festival. So I took that same model and said, instead of selling sponsorships for the film festival, sell opportunities for, Fitzgerald Auto Mall or Geico to actually do a 10-second or 30-second commercial before the film. So it's a little bit of a different approach.
Those are all innovative ideas, and in sponsorship, that's what I like about it, is when you really have to know the business of the people you're selling and be creative.
Right.
What's your unique selling proposition? So, and that leads us right into the to-dos. If Cindy or Stephanie, who is on the call, they need to go get a sponsor, what should they do? What's the approach? Best approaches, best practices and approaches.
I'll jump in.
Gretchen? Oh, wait, you know what? I never got back. Oh, I'm sorry, Gretchen, we never asked you about trends. I blew it.
Oh, that's okay. I thought they had great points. I think the other thing, and this is why I love marketing and sponsorship, is it's always evolving, right? 2 years ago, we weren't tagging our partners in social ads, right? We weren't putting, bumpers ahead of Twitter videos, so I think it's always evolving, which can also be challenging, right? Because you write a contract for a whole year and then something really cool pops up, and the marketing team's going to kill you when you want to go back in and add things. But I think I love the brand alignment. I think I always pride myself on sponsor retention or donor retention, because it's so much easier to renew a client, right, than to go find a new one. We had 100% sponsor retention from 2020 to 2021 for the Spirit, and I was really proud of that because we had no games with any fans. And so for all of those companies to be willing to be happy with the pivots, and we started a Richie Burke show, again, right, everybody's went to Zoom. So we did an online show with our coach, who has an amazing personality, and we were able to satisfy quite a lot of sponsor obligations and deliverables. And then that has created new inventory, right, as we head into this year. Because although we're at full capacity for a home game Friday, I don't know that we're going to sell out. I think a lot of people are still a little, especially with kids not being vaccinated for women's soccer, right? A lot of our audience is children. So being aware of that, and so I love the brand alignment. And I love just, maintaining those relationships.
Okay, excellent. Now I'll get to the to-dos.
Well,
So Jennifer,
that's actually exactly what she just mentioned. That pulls into what I was going to say, is that the to-dos are really digging deep and digging further back in your annual donor last 5 years. Who's given, who's dropped off. It's always easier to renew versus find somebody new. So, it's really a shame that nonprofits, and Melissa, you probably help fill in the gaps here, they just don't have the staff capacity to do all that needs to be done for stewardship, right? And that is a big problem with nonprofits. I'll even say it, I make a donation to a local nonprofit and I don't get a thank you note. Makes me think twice. So I think that I would suggest for nonprofits that are looking to grow their fundraising, I'd go back 5 years, find out who's giving you $1,000 and up, or whatever you're, comparable to your budget, and actually go out and really concentrate the next 6 months on that stewardship. Hey, we know you sponsored back in 2018. We'd love to get you involved. Can we have a virtual meeting? Can we have an in-person meeting? And so again, renewing people that already know your mission versus trying to recreate the wheel.
okay. Any others that you have, or top three?
I would just add on to that. I think I always like to have an invitation, sort of, have a couple of small events in the next 60 to 90 days, right? So if you're going to, whether it's a corporate prospect or even a high level donor, I think sometimes it's easier to say, can you come to a game? Can you come to a salon dinner? Can you come to a happy hour and, meet a participant or meet a board member, or, even just mix with other donors, especially if you're trying to maybe, sort of reignite, a past folk. You don't necessarily want to come straight out with an ask on email or right over the phone. So I love to always have I'm asking our team, like, when can we get, we use salon dinners as a massive tool for our company. And I'm like, when can we get these back? Like, games are great. And that's an incredible, I mean, that is an incredible tool to have, you know, in my world. But actually bringing prospects to training to watch the team play, because our coach is just unbelievable. So I think too, like, who on your staff, like, and sometimes it's not necessarily the executive director. I mean, they're usually really good at fundraising, but, you know, are there a board member? Is there a participant? Like, you know, who else? Is there an amazing volunteer in your organization who really can tell the story and be impassioned about it? Sometimes those are also fantastic people to introduce prospects or donors to.
Right. And they, you know, you want to bring them out to your, and if you're doing an event, even if they don't sponsor this time around, you want to extend an invitation to see if they would still come and see what a great event it is.
I think,
So
you know, I was just
How
sitting
many-
on a panel discussion about events and virtual events. While my history started off in the event space, I'm not right now. I don't know that I'm a fan of large events. I think the one-on-one experience, the salon dinner, the hand holding, getting that person, in your case, you know, Gretchen, on the field, I think that's a better way to create this stewardship that has dropped off because we've sat for the last 18 months in this panic mode. And I think we need to get back to where, you know, again, the donors that have given but have dropped off, how do we get them back? And let's really hold their hand. No one wants to go to a gala. No one wants to spend money, see organizations spending money on food, decor, lighting. So really dumb it down and bring it back to that really intimate hand-holding type of stewardship, I think.
I would piggyback onto some of that concept too, that I actually have seen so many organizations. I mean, their fundraising may have been lower in the dollar level last year, but because their expenses were so far reduced, their net to the organization was so much higher. And so trying to really figure out what that's going to look like going forward. I think the other thing I was going to piggyback too on what you had said, Jennifer, is I know we've seen a lot of cases with one of our largest events where the staff changes at some of those past sponsors. And so we had a really great relationship. We were growing them. They were getting involved. It was feeling really good. And then all of a sudden there's a new person in charge. And so we lose them. But by maintaining that 5-year window that you had alluded to, then when they changed again in a couple of years, it was really easy to get them back on board. So I totally encourage that 5-year review and going back to past sponsors, always for check-ins. And sometimes maybe you were number 2, which later in today's presentation, I'll talk about when we were a number 2 and how it really turned out to play well for us. But my top 3 recommendations for people listening today, I do think that you have to really forge a solid relationship with your sponsors. I think really understanding what they're looking for is so incredibly important. And to Gretchen and Jennifer's point, if it is something that's more personable, if it is something smaller, like when you really have the conversation and ask them if it's a marketing initiative, if it's a DEI initiative, like what are you trying to accomplish? Because you are going to know your organization and your program inside out. And the more you can customize and make your package work for whatever they're looking for, the more likely you are to be able to then get them on board, dip their toe in the water, and then potentially grow them over time. I also think that number 2 is, in my mind, it is incredibly important that you have some base packages organized. I think you are constantly customizing to meet the sponsor's needs based on the number 1 and what that conversation looks like. But I have seen too many cases where people who don't know any better will then come in and they will give the benefits of the top level sponsorship, and this is a small program, so take that for a grain of salt, but the top level benefits go to somebody who's not even sponsoring. And if you're already giving away your benefits and your deliverables, what in the world are they going to buy? Because you've given them everything for nothing. So I think having base packages allows anybody who's supporting sponsorship in your program to be able to have standard language, to have some standard talking points, to have some kind of a general springboard that everybody's utilizing for that consistency. Because the other thing you never want to do is, again, you can't have a high level sponsor and a low level sponsor getting the same thing for significantly different value. That just is not, that's not the way that I ever want to play. I like to be really just transparent and authentic and in full integrity in how we work with our partners. So I think that those are some important pieces. And my third to do, when I first found myself landing accidentally into sponsorship, I was absolutely stunned how many people would call me and say, thank you, when I would return their call. Thank you for calling me back so quickly. And I'm like, let me get this straight.
It's amazing.
You want to give me money and you're surprised I'm calling you back. Like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, it really, from my very early days, I mean, we put sponsorship response at the top of our to-dos. And yes, many pieces of event production are a priority. I know it, I live it, but sponsors are at the top of the list, and they have to have, even if you're working on getting an answer to a question, letting them know you're working on getting an answer to the question and you will get back to them shortly. Incredibly important. And to that, building up your relationship, really being able to then have the long-term connectivity with these people. Those are the things that make all the difference in the world to maintain those relationships and grow your packages and your programs with them.
I want to add three things just to kind of build on what we're all talking about here. I want to change. I want to get rid of the word sponsor, right? Because really, we want partners. We really need to stop saying sponsorship, because we don't care where the money comes out of their annual budget. We really want them as partners as we go down the road, as these nonprofits go down the road. And that partnership might look a little bit different for company A versus company C. With that said, I'm also a firm believer that while nonprofits have their mission and their goals and objectives, there's nothing wrong with having various varieties of case for support, because depending on what that company or that corporation cares about, that's the case for support that you put in there, right? So whether and you try to tie it, whether it's a DEI, whether it's a social justice issue, whether it's an LGBTQ, Black Lives Matters, curing cancer, getting kids out, fitness. And so I think it's okay, while you stay true to your mission, it's okay to present different cases for support depending on who you're speaking to. And lastly, for identifying new sponsors, those partners that are already committed and giving you money, there's nothing wrong. Look, they're your partner now. There's nothing wrong with sitting down with them and saying, can you make 2 or 3 more introductions? Who else can we bring in as a partner? And so they're your front line. They're the ones who will help identify people that they know to come, and they'll be your, the best speakers to talk about your mission and what they're doing and why they give. So I would really heavily rely on your current sponsors and donors and partners to open up new doors for you.
And let me just add board members if you haven't already tapped them.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to echo that is one of the reasons to have those standard packages is so important. And, your talking points, your case for support, or whatever that is, so that your board members or your, who maybe aren't in on the day-to-day, like, key folks, we can talk backwards and forwards about the program, about what's available. We can make things up on the fly, right, in a sponsorship meeting. But a lot of times the peer-to-peer board, relationships are much more powerful, but they might not feel comfortable or know those things. So having a smooth process, having some tools in place, but also having a smooth process with your board members to say, all I need you to do is give me a warm email, or all I need you to do is forward me your email communication. You don't need to make the ask. I think so many people are afraid to make the ask, and that was going to be one of my top points, is we have to ask.
You have to ask.
Yeah, we have to ask. And the faster you get to a no or a yes, the faster you can move on. So I think I have developed such, thicker skin around that. And not everyone's a fit. But again, if your organization has really high retention numbers, like a lot of us do, once you get to those yeses, they're there, forever. And I would just also remind, do your touch points, do your stewardship when you're not asking for anything, drop little notes. I love little, I call them direct premiums, little gifts, like we're such an email swipe, it gets away. Like we do this little thing. I make these custom onesies for the Spirit. You can't buy them anywhere, right? So our owner just emailed me today. So-and-so sponsor, just had a kid. Can you send one of your little packages together? So it's like, I go and get tissue paper and the little package. You can't buy this stuff, right? And people love it. And it's, probably costs about $17, right? It's not some elaborate, expensive thing. So that would be just another thing that I think, sponsors love that type of stuff. Partners, I love that, Jennifer, partners.
It takes one text message. It takes less than a tenth of a second to text somebody and say thank you, or put together a package and mail it to them, or write literally a quick little
handwritten notes.
Handwritten note.
I want to throw in too, Gretchen, the concept that you, in talking about the board, something that we implemented that's worked really well for us is taking, it's a simple form, but we ask every board member to identify 3 leads. And we actually have little check boxes of, we'll make an intro, you can use my name, or please do not mention me, because they're also, right, a lot of our board members are very powerful. They have lots of contacts, but though they don't want those contacts to necessarily, based on their relationship, know that maybe they suggested they be a sponsor. And then when you have that list, it allows you to circle back with the board member like, hey, you haven't made that intro yet. So can we do that this week? Because I'd really like to follow up with them. And so then you've got some tools to also be able to kind of make that a little bit more of an official process. And we've really enjoyed that.
And there's some peer pressure, right? You share it with the whole board and there's accountability, and they might make their emails the night before, right? When the executive director sends out the board agenda and everything, but hey,
it gets it done, which is
the job
like,
done.
when there's no accountability, it's, you don't know.
I have a question for all 3 of you. How do you make your contacts? I mean, do you belong to like the Lions Club or some local business community group?
I'm the wrong girl to ask that scientific question, because I meet people everywhere. I talk to every single person. I hike with my 2 children. We've gone out on the AT, the Appalachian Trail. Like, I met some dude on the Appalachian Trail. Like, I was just in Alaska. I'm trying to get Iditarod as a client. And I then ironically was sitting in a bar and I met some guy. He just sold his company for millions. He's buying building a log cabin in Alaska. Like, I talk to everyone. So that's the unscientific way. But I don't know if you guys have something better, but I'm just a connector. I don't know. It's the universe around me. Like, I meet everybody.
Well, I think it's interesting you say that, Jennifer, because I'm very similar, and I've been in DC now 20 years. And I think when you're in this business, you also have to be so protective of your relationships, right? You can't just go ask everyone for anything, right? You can't, oh, well, now I'm with this client, so everyone in my, Rolodex is going to get this blast email. Like, I'm very careful about my asks. So normally when people, me too. Normally when I'm asking, it gets a consideration, because they know that it's a serious deal. I will say it's so interesting now with some of the tools, right? Like with we use the Sponsor United tool, which is fascinating because you can actually see what companies are doing. And so I think that has given me some extra leverage on companies I might not normally think of. Or if I'm looking for a specific industry, like I'm looking at pizza places, right? Like I don't necessarily have any relationships in the pizza world, but I might concentrate there. But I think, like talking and being whatever, whoever you're with or whatever you're, if it's a client or a company, like normally us nonprofit girls, like that becomes our, living, breathing passion. It's on our social media, it's on our personal, it's on our LinkedIn, it's on everywhere. and then maintaining those, and again, look, like we talked about earlier, the win-win relationships. But it is funny because I do feel like there's so
win-win or no deal. That's it. And you don't marry together. Well, me as an independent consultant working with several nonprofits, I don't marry my own personal relationship with a client unless it's a win-win.
Yes. Yeah, because it's your reputation. Yeah.
Correct.
But I think too, it's fascinating. When I first started working, we weren't using email for business, right? I mean, it was phone calls, in person, all of that. And now it's fascinating how we'll text message, we'll Facebook message, I've done Twitter direct messages like from the Spirit account, right? Reaching out to different people, or Instagram direct messages, right? Or LinkedIn. Like there's so many things now. But I still think there's just something about the old school, just people who can make a connection or make an introduction, that is a lost art form.
I absolutely agree with that. And I'm the same way, Gretchen. I mean, I think about the first time when I started, and my sponsorship packages, they were actually they look like custom invitations. I mean, I put a lot of time and effort into them for that first event I had to do. And I utilized, at that point, thank God there was the web. And I started looking at similar events in other cities. I started what kinds of companies are supporting this kind of a project? And it allowed me, I went to the bigger cities, right? New York, LA, and just really started kind of researching to be like, all right, these are companies I'm going to try to go after. And it was really hard to try to call and get a foot in the door, but then I'd send a package and then I'd do the follow-up. And I think there's never been an easier way than using LinkedIn to find certain people. You can find people easier than I ever could in the beginning. So I think there's some real advantages there. But I do also agree that there's a million people reaching out. I feel so bad for the beer and the wine companies. They just, everybody thinks you've got so much, you can give me some, right? And I know how hard it is for them to evaluate where they participate or where they support and why they can't do everybody. But I think, to that point, when you have somebody who can make that intro, help you elevate above the other people making the cold calls, you're definitely going to go farther. And even sometimes reaching out to some of those organizations in the other cities, I would again ask for those introductions. So it was an unexpected place, but they didn't have anything to lose because I'm not in their territory. It's not competitive in that environment. They're on the West Coast, I'm in the Midwest, hey, can you make this introduction? So I really think being able to ask other organizations that are like you, don't be afraid to reach out to them and ask if they can make an intro so you can find the contact in your region. And that again is far easier than doing cold calls.
There are on a few occasions where I'll do the and I do this for my clients, I'll do the research for prospects and I will make a cold call. But there is an alignment. Here's an example. I did a rod. I had the opportunity to speak to a couple of mushers. Literally, I'm so out of my element here, but I'm learning. And they actually make their own sleds by using hockey sticks. So I said, well, why are we not calling somebody?
Bauer.
Right. Right. And so they're like, holy cannoli, we never thought about that. So I think, and I'm like, all right, well, I don't really know anybody at Bauer. I don't really know anybody, but let's tackle that.
I have a lot of contacts in the hockey world, Jennifer. I can help.
Okay, good. My son plays ice hockey, but I don't know anybody. But those are on occasion where that's the strategy that I love. Why clients hire me is, all right, let's come up with a strategy. Well, sometimes the strategy is thinking outside the box. If you've got 99 mushers building their own sleds using hockey sticks, let's pull in that industry, right?
But so I've done, I was talking about using Facebook. I actually did 5 Facebook cold messages to, the period underwear right now, right? It's like a new thing, right? For teenagers and women. I'm like, this is perfect for the Spirit. We have this huge demographic of young girls. We're trying to be empowerment, right? What is more empowering than, making a young girl? I can't tell you what a weird time that was, right? Back when you were that age as an athlete, and so of the 5 companies I've reached out to on Facebook, 2 have already gotten back to me with direct contacts to have conversations with them. So exact same type of thing, Jennifer, right? And it makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah.
So along that line of, that new product for women, what are some other new product categories in the sponsorship area that you've been looking at or have come on the market recently?
For me, it just depends on the client. I mean, I think it's obviously the brands. It's, I haven't necessarily, I mean, I do a lot with the military. So for me, it's like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, 3M, Rolls-Royce, gun manufacturers. So if I'm working with Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation, it's that, the Gary Sinise Foundation, it's, he does a lot for first responders. So it's looking at fire gear, fire equipment for the firemen. So for me, it really depends on the client and what their mission is.
Well, I think it's interesting to see, we talked about this offline, cannabis is spending a lot of money. Streaming services are spending a lot of money.
Betting?
Yeah, sports betting, fantasy, which we're having a really hard time getting taken seriously in our league, which is interesting. Yeah, well, I was gonna say also like the Wix and the apps and the Shopify and a lot of the connectors, right, are spending. DoorDash did the front of the Angel City jersey for a 7-figure multi-year deal. So those are some of the things I'm seeing. The hard seltzer category, obviously, I think there's some beer dollars being, it's like I'm a big hockey fan, Jennifer, as I said, and every single venue has some hard seltzer on their boards, and they're different brands, they're different brand families. And frankly, I love booze, seeing booze spend in women's sports. One of the big things that I thought after the 2019 World Cup, when the team, the U.S. national team won and they were drunk and it wasn't the end of the world, that was a big turning point for me with women's soccer, that these women don't have to be just these perfect role models. They can also be, women, and, we don't just need to have grocery stores advertise with us. Like, women are making, whatever, 80% of the decisions in the household. So let's go. Cars, let's go, let's get some of these hard categories in here.
I want to also just throw this out there, and I tell clients sometimes these don't translate. So I'm a big believer that perception is not reality, right? So what you seem to think we see isn't always the case. Like, let's personal Facebook, right? So what you seem to think everyone's so happy, but so sometimes you need to create partnerships. It might not translate to an actual dollar figure today, but down the road it will. So you talk about this period underwear or whatever, maybe there's an opportunity to partner with them, but likewise, there's opportunities for nonprofits to partner with other nonprofits. I had a great conversation with the woman who started the Sports Bra Project, and she's this very small, works out of her house. Like, they distribute free sports bras to women in sports. And so, Gretchen, I'm just saying, like, maybe for you as a nonprofit, partnering with another nonprofit is not going to give you money in your bank, but it's going to grow it's that guerrilla marketing, right? It's going to grow that network. It's going to grow that do good, do a little bit more, do good. And so it down the road, it will pay off.
And audience borrowing. I think right now, like, we're, in our market, right? Like, the core soccer people know about us, right? The core adults, the core kids, they know about us. We now need to get to those casual sports fans, right? So that's like, can we try to do some cross marketing with the Washington football team or whatever else it is, because you're going to get to a whole new audience. Yeah. And sometimes you got to buy your impressions, right? Like, I have a package right now that's like a Metro digital buyout, and I'm kind of having in my back pocket, if I need to add some impressions to a sponsorship deal, I can I can add this on, and I can give you another, 20,000 eyeballs on a weekend at, Navy Yard Metro.
But that goes back to your point too, is thinking outside the box. Obviously, you're women's soccer, but often it's the dads that are taking these young girls to play soccer, and it's the dads that are the coaches. And so doing some sort of marketing to appeal to, again, it's a different market. It's not girls, it's 50-year-old men who care about their kids. So you really have to audience sharing. That's right.
And it goes back to that same point that you talked about earlier too, about the fact of being able to use a different case support for different partners, and being able to bring that back around. And I know that I'm in Chicago, and one of the things we've really seen is a lot of the fundraising that's happening is not this direct support, but it is offering, a bundle of tickets. And again, this was pre-COVID when things were not in, there was a lot more demand for things in the in-person space, but a lot of our sports teams here are actually doing these bundles where nonprofits can get a bundle of tickets, sell them to their audience, and then they get promoted at the game. And it's a partnership for the sports organization to support the local nonprofits and really shows them doing good, but it brings awareness to the partners and there's some fundraising in the process. So I think those kinds of, opportunities really do start to introduce you to new people, new opportunities, and continuing to look at what might come. And I do think, back to Lisa, to your original question, just thinking about anything that you see trending. I love to always pay attention to billboards, because if they've got billboards, they've got money to invest. And so if that's a hot area, listen to your radio ads. Who's running those radio ads that might be new on the scene? And really just think about, oh, there's some new company coming into my market locally. Maybe they're going to want to support us too, or maybe they tie into our cause.
That's right.
Well, before we move on, big shout out to Sarah with the Sports Bra Project. She was a student in the Sport Philanthropy executive.
She's amazing.
Program, so.
She's amazing. And
yeah.
Gretchen, I'd be happy to put the two of you together. She's amazing.
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, so we're going to conclude with your favorite sponsorship activation. And the favorite could be what made most sense, creative, fun, or most effective, most impactful.
I'll go first. I have a really fun one. This is from 2019, and Geico was our first big sponsor for the Spirit when the new owner took over, and they were amazing, and they're actually so easy to work with because they're really low maintenance, and they kind of give you a chance to do whatever you want. So they had sent over 2 boxes of these little geckos, like these 3-inch gecko stuffies, and it was like 400. I'm like, what the heck am I going to do with 400? That's not enough to do a gate giveaway, what am I going to do with these? And it was the day of a game, and I was like, okay. And I was like, let's hide them. Let's write the numbers of all the players dressing that day and hide them around the stadium. And then post, if they find the kid or the person who finds them post game can go on the field and get a picture with that person. Because our players are the biggest draw for our fans. And so we popped it up on social. We I don't even know who went into the gecko costume, and we staged some pictures and we popped it on social. This is the day of, this is no pre-promotion. This is game day. And then, they hit them all over. And then I remember I was inside after the gates had opened, and I looked out and I'm like, why are there people running around everywhere? It caught fire. And so people were there, 90 minutes early. I mean, several hundred people. And this is pre-World Cup. So this is kind of pre our, sort of trajectory, running around. And then there was a huge social bump out of it. But the funniest part was afterwards, we didn't really think this through because it was a, game day idea. And so we had everybody lined, the kids lined up, the players did their little chat. And then they turned to me and they were like, okay, we're doing something. And I was like, oh, I don't really know how we're gonna do this. So Jordan DiBiase, Stanford kid, gets everyone, she goes, line up in number order, and then we'll go in number order. And she just, players just took care of the whole thing. So that was one of my favorite, just add-on activations that engage the fans, the players, the sponsors, social, and it was kind of just organic and grassroots. And
Geico probably loved it.
Yeah. And it cost nothing, no hard costs. It wasn't, and again, I had great players that then put themselves in order and took care of that part. But that was a pretty fun one.
That's cool. I can't share. I don't have any, really can't. I'm still thinking.
I can go. So, one of the companies, when I first started, it goes way back to my early days because it was just such a big win. But so the first event that I had to do sponsorship for when I was an executive director was RibFest Chicago. And RibFest Chicago was in a small neighborhood on the north side of the city, and it competed very heavily with all of the downtown events that were citywide events like the Taste of Chicago and things of that nature. But being a barbecue event, we knew that our demographic surprisingly ran only 51% men. We always thought with the ribs and meat that it would be higher, but our surveys, had it at 51%. But we did know with the primarily male domination there that the idea of getting Sony PlayStation to the event was just something that we really thought would be ideal. And so when I was doing all my custom outreach in my early days, trying to knock on doors and make friends and figure out how to teach myself to do sponsorship, I kept mailing to PlayStation, didn't get a response. And then finally, it was like 2006, I think, and we finally got a response from them and the whole reason that before we had been on their radar, it turns out the whole time, and they loved the idea, but the mandate that the agency had from the company, from direct from Sony, was that they had to go to events that had 300,000 people or more, and that wasn't us. We were in the 25 to 30,000 space. And so, it really was just not the right time. But then as soon as the mandate from the parent company came down, the agency was like calling us right away, like, we want in. And I was like, oh my God, like they're taking our biggest package. They need so much real estate. This is going to be amazing. And it was hysterical because it created a whole nother domino of problems on activation, because we're on a city street. They're only so wide. The truck had to open up to be able to on both sides, and it took the whole street. And that violates all the city ordinances. And so really trying to work around all of the logistics, but we absolutely did it. They needed special wiring, special connectivity. Again, the internet was not what it is today, and they needed to be sure that they could run their games from the truck. And then we ended up being able to have them for 3 years running, and it was just a fabulous partnership and a huge win. And our attendees loved having them there. It was a really great fit for everybody. And just took our planning skills to a whole new level. But it felt really good to have just the validation that a company we had really been pitching so long, and we knew that it was right for our audience. And when it finally happened and all the pieces just clicked, it was just such a satisfying feeling that I still to this day, it warms my heart.
That's awesome.
I have a total stunt one if we have time for one more funny one. So
Sure.
last year the NWSL was the first one in the bubble, right? So all the games were at one location, and there was this playground at the location. And so it got its own Twitter account, like it was just in the camera shots, right? For, the entire tournament. And so we were going to have the first nationally televised game in the fall series. And I said, guys, we got to get a playground. Like we have to find a playground. And so I was getting work done on my house at the time, and my contractor, who's now a good friend, very community minded, he went out and found the massive wood, found one, rehabbed it. We set it up in really good camera spot. We ended up then donating it to a local charity in Loudoun, but it got camera time. It got mentions on national TV. So my small contractor who, did this for us, so their company had people calling them saying, oh my God, we saw you on the NWSL, and we were able to do a gift, so it was like a stunt, it was a play on that.
Love that.
Gift to charity. So I just dawned on me that that was a pretty
Love that.
share. And it didn't cost anything.
Even better.
Jennifer, do you have one?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think. This is a little bit off topic, but not really. I mean, I think because I'm was in the event space as well. And just, I do on occasion work with for-profit companies. So one of my companies a long time ago was Federal Realty Investment Trust. They wanted to really drive traffic to one of their properties in the city of in Rockville, Maryland, and create more. And so we tag teamed with, I planned an entire tomato festival, and we sold, beer mugs or whatever, and the money went to the charity. So it was really, my client was on the corporate side, but the money through the form of this event. So I think nonprofits could also look for opportunities like that. Street festivals that are already happening. They can work with, convention and visitors bureaus or downtown bids that are doing activation opportunities anyway, and maybe create some sort of revenue stream for them at already existing events.
Exactly. Those are all great ideas. Is there any other thing that we have not covered? Analytics. I mean, Gretchen, you kind of touched on it, but what about measurement? How do you keep your sponsors engaged? How do you set up objectives early on so that, and then keep them aware of how your metrics are going?
Oh, so this is a tricky one. I mean, business analytics is becoming jobs, full-time jobs in the sports space. And there's some amazing software companies out there that are being able to measure whether it's social, broadcast, etc. I think this is such a tricky one because all of the data right now isn't always stuff you want to share. So I try not to set up any expectations that I'm going to share anything until the end of the year, and then it's in the beautiful PowerPoint with all of just the highlights. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. We were just starting to work with a company, I guess 2 years ago, and Rose Lavelle and Mal Pugh had just come back from the World Cup, and they threw out the first pitch at a Nats game. And so there was, social on their social and ours. And crazily enough, Next Era Cap was like the back of the dugout sponsor for the Nats. And that got the most, it got like $500,000 worth of social value from Rose and Mal throwing out the first pitch.
Yeah, I think you work with Zoom, right?
Yes.
So it's a company that does social media evaluation, and they're great.
I have a question for my fellow panelists in those. Do you all ever buy lists? No, it's a waste of money. Yeah.
I list like for fundraising lists.
For prospects, yeah. Like if you did a certain demographic, it's a waste of money, right?
Yeah, I think, I'm taking clients on again, and two of the folks I'm talking to, I have a specific service in there to go through their existing folks. Because like you talked about, they just don't have time, right, to go through and to, stalk them on LinkedIn and cross-reference and do some Google research. Your folks who've been connected, even if it's, I like your 5-year window, even if it's been as long as 5 years, that's still someone who knows you a little, has some connection, some sense.
Yeah.
And I think, if you're, I would rather say like boost some social or do some paid social on an audience lookalike or friends of friends before just like buying a list.
Yeah.
But like you invested, but this is a team, it's a larger entity in Sponsor United, which does give you contact information for different sponsors and what, lists what they sponsor as well. So that's a service that you would pay for.
Right.
Is a list.
Yeah, but I'm like then looking, and then I'm going to look them up on LinkedIn and see who we're connected to, and see how long it's. It puts it from a cold to a cool,
Yeah. And
Lisa, the one other thing I wanted to add on the data too, and I think Gretchen kind of touched on this, right? Just a smidgen indirectly, but I would also really talk about the integrity of the data that you do share. I know that for us, again, going back to my very first, this was something I learned very early out of the gate about the importance of the information. And so in Chicago, there are just a bazillion festivals, and that is just what we are. And, I used to be so amazed. I was like, well, gosh, like, how do those people know they got 50,000 attendees? How can they tell their sponsors this many people are coming? And the amount of real estate they had, like doing the comparison, I was like, we only had 20,000 and we have a bigger space. Like how could they even possibly do that? And so we literally set up ways for us to actually tabulate people walking in the gate on a street in Chicago. But, and people, sponsors have come to us and they're like, oh my God, like we did better at your event that said 30,000 people than an event that said they had 100,000 attendees, because our numbers are right, you know, and they're like, this felt more like 100,000, but we didn't care. Like we had to be in alignment with ourselves and we had to put out good data.
Yep.
And so sometimes we think that, you know, because our numbers were lower, we may have lost some sponsors who wanted the higher numbers, but we had a pretty highly desirable demographic. And with those effective numbers, I just think, again, when you look at the long-term partnerships, we're not looking at one and done. And the other last parting thought too, that when we kind of talked about other best practices, but I also am a huge fan in that relationship building of first right of refusal. And even if I have, like, one of our highest partners is a beer sponsor, and every year if another company comes in and wants to outbid them, bless you, Lisa, we still like go back to them and say, hey, this is the situation.
Yep.
And this company wants to come in, but we really want to keep you. You've been here from the beginning when nobody else was knocking on our door. And so how can we, you know, can we do more with you? Can we get you to step up and do a little bit more? And so we just have honest, open conversations, which I think as you look at that deeper level relationship building is really critical.
Yeah, I like that. I agree.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also, you know, especially when you're working with smaller, or, you know, if you are a smaller organization, don't discount the man hours that it takes to get up to speed with a new partner, right? If you renew a partner and maybe you know, they get a 10% discount versus someone new that might come in, but you're saving 100 hours probably of, like, you know, just man hours and getting things up to speed. And the other point, Melissa, I love your point about the data. I worked in like program, like youth and adult program nonprofits for a long time. And, you know, make sure that you're reporting your data in an authentic way. So if you have, you know, unique participants versus like registrations, if that same person is going to do 7 programs per year, however you're going to report it, like make sure that you're reporting it in that way. I think that's also like really important to just make sure that again, authentic data and being transparent is really important.
And there's value in that, right? Like if you have somebody who's going to be in 7 programs and they see the same sponsorship information. I mean, in my early days, right, you needed to see somebody's branding 8 times for success. I think now it's got to be at least 12 times. So a repeat program participant can actually be a value in some cases too.
And don't forget about the value of qualitative research, especially in nonprofit programming. So if you get testimonials from kids or, you know, information about, you know, somebody writing from college saying, thank you, so-and-so organization for supporting, I'm now in college doing great. I would never have been able to do this without you. Those testimonials can go a long way. So I always emphasize, especially for small nonprofits that may not have the big wow numbers,
That's right.
you have to rely on the qualitative
That's right.
feedback and get your sponsors out to see these kids and all they're doing. So with that, I want to, you know, Cindy, thank you for staying with us the whole time. Do you have any questions? I think Cindy's our audience here. But anyway, thank you, Gretchen. Thank you, Jennifer, Melissa, for being with us today. And Jonathan, Owen, for your assistance as well. And we look forward to having you all go out and sell lots of sponsorships and keep those nonprofits going. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. It was fun.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
No, thank you guys.